All right, so we start with this, the first of multiple high-stakes meetings this week coming to an end. Of course, we're talking about a virtual call between President Trump, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, and several European leaders. The details of that unfolding at this hour, including a warning from Zelenskyy that Putin is, quote, bluffing about putting an end to the war. Okay, so let's talk about that. That call happening just days ahead of the president's face-to-face with Russian President Vladimir Putin scheduled for Alaska. Now, we now know where those talks will take place and why Zelenskyy did not get an invite. Moments ago, Mr. Trump sounded off on that and that virtual meeting during remarks announcing the honorees for the Kennedy Center. Let's listen.
How were your calls this morning with European leaders, and was it your call not to invite President Zelenskyy to your meeting with Putin?
No, just the opposite. No. We had a very good call. He was on the call. President Zelenskyy was on the call. I would rate it a 10, very, very friendly. I know the leaders because I was at NATO, as you know. I took it from 2% to 5%, 2% that wasn't paid, 5% that is paid, which is trillions of dollars in defense capability. No, it was always going to be I was going to meet with President Putin, and then after that I'm going to call the leaders and President Zelenskyy. I'm going to call President Zelenskyy, and then I'll call, probably in that order, the leaders.
So let's go live to the White House and CBS News reporter Taurean Small. Taurean, what more are we learning about what happened in that call?
Yeah, so Reed, the president is holding his cards pretty close to his chest. We're still waiting on a full readout of the conversation and if that'll happen, whether or not it come from the White House or from those European leaders involved in this conversation. But it was clear that at least on our allies' side, so that being the German chancellor who requested this meeting, as well as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, that they wanted to be in his ear before that sit down with Putin happens. Zelenskyy made it clear any conversation about the lines of demarcation must involve Ukraine in order to protect their own interests, even though the president has previously said, just as recent as this week, that a land swap is likely to happen. Zelenskyy likely looking at this and saying either he's at the table or on the menu, which is why we saw this conversation happen. But still, the president isn't saying much outside of the fact that he's willing to have another conversation with Zelenskyy after his meeting with Putin, and whether or not a trilateral meeting could happen is still to be seen, but the president isn't ruling that out, at least until after his face-to-face with Putin happens first, Reed.
All right, so what are you looking out to happen in that face-to-face meeting? Because the president has said he'll know within minutes whether he's going to see a deal, because we know also that what happens Friday lays the groundwork for a hoped-for third call.
Yeah, and this is one of those situations where the president came into this, or is coming into this, with very tempered expectations. The White House is really categorizing this upcoming meeting as what they're calling a listening exercise. No prerequisites, no demands on the table at first. He's just looking to have a conversation with Putin. But interestingly enough, the president during this press conference at the Kennedy Center said that there could be consequences for Putin if he isn't willing to come to the negotiating table. Take a listen to what he said.
Will Russia face any consequences if Vladimir Putin does not agree to stop the war after your meeting on Friday?
Yes, they will. Yeah.
What will the consequences
there will be
be?
consequences.
Sanctions, tariffs?
There will be, I don't have to say, there will be very severe consequences.
Well, you just heard it from him. He won't say exactly what those consequences will look like, but he is considering that if Putin is unwilling to play ball. He's also grown increasingly frustrated by the fact that Putin is continuing his bombardment of Ukraine. He was asked during that press conference about his take on whether or not Putin will stop attacking innocent civilians in Ukraine. He said in response, there's nothing that he could do. He's had this conversation with Putin before, and he's frustrated by the fact that he's been unwilling to listen to President Trump so far.
All right, and so we've got to ask about the event where all of these announcements came from the president. This event at the Kennedy Center announcing the honorees. What stood out to you? I noticed that President Trump is honoring many people who are his supporters.
Yeah, that's curious, especially considering one of which is Sylvester Stallone, a name that I knew on this list because I'm a fan of the Rocky series. And then we had Michael Straight, a country star, musical star. We also had Kiss, which is interesting because one of the lead band members, Gene Simmons, has had this tumultuous type of relationship with President Trump. He supported him somewhat during his first term, then had some disparaging remarks about him during the 2024 cycle, or 2020 cycle, I should say. But now we're seeing that the president is not only embracing them during this honors ceremony, the president is also taking up the mantle as host of this event, which he remarked is quite strange for himself. But considering that he and the administration has done a complete takeover of the Kennedy Center, serving on the board now, it just makes sense to him and his staff that he would be the one to lead the charge on this first Kennedy honor under his new administration.
Yeah, he's setting himself up for some rating scrutiny because he talked about how the Oscar ratings are down. So it'll be fascinating to see what the ratings are with the President of the United States hosting those. Taurean Small, always great to talk to you. On Friday, CBS News will have live coverage all day from this moment of consequence in Alaska, that meeting between President Trump and Russia's President Putin. Plus, John Dickerson will anchor evening news from Anchorage, Alaska, along with Face the Nation anchor Margaret Brennan.